Life moves fast, and your home is at the center of it all. Don't let plumbing issues put a stop to your daily routine. There's never a good time to experience a plumbing disaster, so make Legacy Heating and Air your first call at the first sign of trouble. Our team of local plumbing professionals is here to help with problems large or small. A stopped drain doesn't have to stop everything. Trust the on-time guarantee, expert advice, quality workmanship, and honest service you've come to expect from the Legacy team. Call or schedule online at legacyheatingandairinc.com.
All right, welcome everybody to Football Never Sleeps, our weekly YouTube show here for Inside Indie Sports. I'm Tyler James. Eric Hansen is back on vacation, but we have more than capable replacement for tonight's conversation. I'm joined by Rivals National Recruiting Director Adam Gorney. Adam, thanks for joining us from the West Coast.
Of course, Tyler. Good to be here.
So yeah, everyone, if you don't know Adam, he's been working for Rivals for quite some time. He's our National Recruiting Director, and we'll focus our conversation on recruiting tonight. But before we get into the show, we can't forget our usual YouTube reminders. Please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel here. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for reminders of when we have content, and hit that like button to support the show. We are an interactive show, as many of you know, so feel free to submit questions throughout the show. If you're unfamiliar with the YouTube process, make sure that you're not trying to submit questions if you're watching us embedded somewhere. So click through either in the app or on a desktop. If you're on a mobile device, the comment section should be below us. And if you're on a desktop, it should be on the right-hand side. And lastly, if you're not a subscriber to the website, we hope you consider taking advantage of our 30-day free trial to InsideIndieSports.com and using the promo code NDYT. Sign up to get access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time. Share our inside information first. Adam likes to stop by and share what he's doing. Yesterday, I shared an interview with Notre Dame safety commit Ivan Taylor and followed up today with some more intel on Notre Dame's recruiting weekend. There's a link to sign up for that deal in the video description below. All right, Adam, let's get to Notre Dame's recent string of official visitors from last week. Notre Dame hosted 5 2025 targets for official visits since the last time we had a Football Never Sleeps. In the middle of last week, they hosted 3 guys: 4-star safety Jadon Blair, 4-star athlete Dylan Robinson, who Notre Dame is recruiting as a wide receiver, and 3-star receiver John Anthony Hall. Then over the weekend, a pair of 4-star receivers made official visits: Derek Meadows and Chinook Hines. And while those guys were on campus, a host of Notre Dame's commits, mostly offensive guys, were also on campus to help them enjoy their weekend. Let's start, Adam, by discussing Meadows, who's pictured on the thumbnail for YouTube. He's the highest ranked of the group, and arguably the most important remaining target left for Notre Dame. What do you like about Meadows as a recruit?
Well, he's a great looking player. That first off, he's a legit 6'4.5", 6'5". He also runs track. And one of the reasons why he hasn't been doing much football at all this offseason is because he has a track injury, a hamstring pull that's kept him out of a lot of stuff. So he wasn't seen a lot this offseason. That's unfortunate because he could even be higher in our rankings than he is right now. He's a great looking kid. An outside receiver, think like a Chase Claypool type guy that is, muscled up but not too heavy. Can definitely run the routes. He had a great catch at Battle Miami this offseason that sort of went viral. And then he's a huge red zone target. So he's got that length. He's got the size, and as he adds weight, he'll probably end up at like 6'6", 210. Stay at wide receiver and be a big outside target.
All right. Yeah. And it seems like Notre Dame is in a pretty good spot. They've been recruiting him a long time. What do you think of Notre Dame's chances with Derek?
Yeah, my sense is that Notre Dame still leads. He has taken other visits. I think he liked the Michigan visit a lot, but he's also a kid that goes to Gorman, which has, pretty strict policies to go to school there. And I think he wants to carry that over. So I think he's playing the recruiting game a little bit. He's going to take visits and look at other schools that I think the SEC schools are a little intriguing to him. Alabama and possibly Georgia even. But I just get the sense that he's long down the road with the Irish, and I think they still lead in his recruitment.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think this official visit was probably necessary for Notre Dame to sort of remain in that position, because I do think some other schools have been gaining some momentum. Michigan, like you mentioned, curious what his thoughts are after an Alabama official visit that he's scheduled to take. But I still have some confidence that Notre Dame can land him. I put a future cast in for Notre Dame, I think back in March. But I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk yet. I feel good enough to leave my future cast on Notre Dame. I don't anticipate changing that. But we'll see how these last couple official visits go for him with LSU and Alabama on the schedule. But that would be certainly a big addition for Notre Dame at the wide receiver position, which they continue to do plenty of work at. He was joined, like I mentioned, by Tanook Hines, another receiver that Notre Dame likes a lot. Tanook Hines' specialty is his speed. He's a 6'1", 170-pound receiver out of Houston. Notre Dame offered him December. He was actually the first receiver in the 2025 class that new Notre Dame wide receivers coach Mike Brown offered once he came to Notre Dame. So I think that's held a little bit of weight. USC and Texas have hosted him for official visits. Baylor is next up for him. I think it's Texas as the biggest competitor if the Longhorns push. The problem is, I guess it's not a problem if you're a Texas fan. They have a lot of talented wide receivers on the board. So that Tanook Hines might not be a priority. I think USC could be a competitor. If you're Notre Dame, from my standpoint, I think I would be more worried about Texas than USC if they push. But I guess you have to just figure that out. And I think Texas will probably have a pretty good idea here soon of where it stands with some of its other receivers. But I do think Notre Dame's in good shape with Tanook and could be another potential addition to the class for Notre Dame. Dylan Robinson is another intriguing recruit to me who's out there on the West Coast by you, Adam. Teams seem to be split about whether he is a receiver or defensive back. Eric Hansen had an interview with him following his official visit. What do you think Robinson would be better suited to play?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think he's a better defensive player, but that's only because I've seen him more on defense. He is one of these true athletes that you can kind of put anywhere on the field and he's going to make an impact. We hadn't seen a lot of him before this offseason. He plays on the same team as Noah McHale, the star linebacker there. So we saw him a little bit last year, but he's really sort of emerged this offseason as one of the better players in Southern California. And it's because he's a great looking kid. So I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up as sort of an outside linebacker, possibly. He could stay as a big safety, or he can flip over and play wide receiver. It is interesting that Notre Dame is recruiting him at receiver. I don't know if that's something that Robinson sort of wanted to hear or sort of secretly is more interested in. I had always kind of envisioned him on the defensive side of the ball, but that's only because we've seen him there more. So that's certainly an interesting one. And then on Hines, like you said, Tyler, Texas is in a very enviable position right now where it feels like they possibly lead for DeCorian Moore, Kalik Lockett, Jamie French, Andrew Marsh is on the board, possibly Kelshawn Johnson. So just because they're loading up at receiver and have these number one targets could actually benefit Notre Dame with Hines. USC can be in there as well. But it does, I do get the sense that if he's getting the idea that maybe I'm a kind of the second string kind of guy for Texas and Notre Dame really pushes, especially since they showed so much early love, I think that could play in Notre Dame's benefit.
Yeah, the Texas visit sort of came out of nowhere. I did not know it was happening until right before it happened, and I don't know that many other people did either.
Yeah.
So that's something to monitor. But like you said, yeah, that list of receivers is probably making Notre Dame fans jealous of guys that they could potentially be adding to the Texas class. But yeah, as for Robinson, my understanding, or at least what my reporting indicates, that Notre Dame and Washington may be the two that are battling back and forth for him right now, and they're recruiting him opposite. Like Washington is recruiting him as a defensive back, and Notre Dame is recruiting him as a receiver. So, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out if Notre Dame, especially if, as we talk later, maybe they lose Ivan Taylor in the class and need a safety. I think Notre Dame maybe would be open to that if it can get some other receivers in his class. I think receiver is the bigger need right now, but maybe that ends up being a potential for Notre Dame. So keep recruiting a guy that obviously very experienced coaches thinks could play on either side of the ball. So that'll be a fascinating recruitment.
Yeah, I also get the sense UCLA and to an extent Utah are in there, but I would not discount UCLA for him to stay home.
Yeah. I think UCLA is next up for an official visit, so that maybe that puts UCLA back into a spot. And UCLA is also recruiting him as defensive back. Utah is recruiting him as a receiver. So we'll see who can get the number 16 athlete in the country in that 2025 class. The last receiver that we haven't discussed yet is John Anthony Hall. He's a 3-sport star at Fishers High here in Indiana. He visited last week, and then right after that, Notre Dame's men's basketball program held a team camp with some teams from throughout the Midwest, and one of those teams was John Anthony's high school. So that worked out in Notre Dame's favor for a one-day camp. 6'1", 170 pounds, a 3-star recruit, unranked as a wide receiver. He seems like the one, just based on his offers and his ranking, that would be maybe, and the fact that he's from Indiana, would maybe be the easiest to get. But I don't know that that's necessarily a layup. Maybe pun intended there as a guy that plays basketball. I don't know if there's a great sense if he is like all in on football, if he wants to try to play basketball and try to do both. I think it's really hard to do at the Division I level. So every time a guy suggests that he's going to do that, I sort of rule that out. But yeah, kids can be convinced otherwise and convince themselves otherwise. Northwestern and Stanford are schools he's made official visits to already. Purdue and Indiana are schools he's planning to make official visits to. What do you think Hall can do? I don't know how much you've seen of him to potentially make the leap to a 4-star recruit.
So I'll start with this. His ranking right now was a little bit of an oversight by us.
Okay.
We are moving him up. We are in the process of having that happen. And he certainly deserves it. And it's not based off of any offers. It's really just, there are just only so many kids you can see in so many hours of the day that you can do it. But we love kids who are multi-sport athletes. So if any kids are listening right now and any coach or parent is telling you to focus on one, absolutely do not listen to them, because the things you learn in basketball carry over to the football field so well. Dynamic athletic ability, balance, ability to play through contact, all of those kinds of things. And then he's also a star track athlete. So we're talking about a 3-sport, I believe, state champion too. So he's also a winner. And what I love most about him on film is not only does he get by defensive backs, that's not hard. No offense, Tyler, but it's not too hard. Fishers, Indiana, to run by some defensive backs. But what he does is the ball's overthrown a lot of times, and he extends and makes plays with his hands. He's not just kind of running under a ball and waiting for it. So he's got great hands. He has great athletic ability, and he's a dynamic athlete. So he's someone that, like, I don't want to say Notre Dame needs, but they definitely need like that speedy spark at wide receiver sometimes, and he would absolutely 100% provide it. Especially that's why Stanford likes him, because they're moving away, very quickly and very painfully in year one from just sort of running the ball up the middle all the time. Troy Taylor is trying to try to revitalize that that offense quickly, and John Anthony Hall is someone who can definitely do that. So don't look at a 5.5 3-star right now. That is changing, and we love multi-sport athletes. In terms of them then doing multiple sports in college, I'm sort of okay with him running track. That's fine. Not crazy about him playing basketball. And the sense is, I don't think the coaches are really either. Like, that is a recruiting tactic. But if he's 6'1", 170, Marcus Freeman is going to want him to be 6'1", 195. You cannot gain 25 pounds by running up and down a basketball court all winter. So They want them on their programs. And so I think he's going to try to get him in, muscle him up, and keep that speed.
Yeah, and Brian Habermel says, so Adam would like that the Faisons played lacrosse and football. So Dylan Faison obviously has and Jordan Faison are the 2-sport And they're very good at lacrosse too, in addition to football. So that'll be fun to continue to watch as their careers played, because one of them already made a pretty big impact as a freshman at Notre Dame this past season.
Yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania. We didn't have lacrosse there, surprisingly. I worked at Newsday in New York, and my editor made me go cover lacrosse, and I was like ruining it all day because I didn't even really know what it was. And I saw it for the first time. I was like, this is awesome. This is like hockey on grass. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah. Jordan Faison was a heck of a player for Notre Dame's national champion team this past season. And they say his younger brother's just as good as him, allegedly, at lacrosse. I'm not a lacrosse expert by any means, but I do enjoy watching it. I just couldn't tell you why someone's better than someone else necessarily.
It's like me with football.
So let's talk about the Notre Dame's wide receiver recruiting more broadly. What are your thoughts on Notre Dame's wide receiver recruiting in general? Is Notre Dame recruiting the position at a high enough level right now?
So I'll say this: taking guys like Burris and Bettis, there's certainly like a legacy factor there, and like an idea of what makes certain players great and what it takes to get to the highest levels and things. But I would say both are not necessarily projects, but not sure things from day one. Both are great looking kids. They're about 6'1", 6'2", about 190 pounds. I like Bettis probably a little bit more, and then at tight end, Flanagan, I think, is phenomenal. So I think from tight end, you're set, but Notre Dame needs to get, some faster, shiftier guys, make the offense a little bit more threatening. It could open up opportunities for guys like Burris and Bettis, and then see where that goes from there. So, whether that is a John Anthony Hall or whether that is some other guys that I'm sure we'll talk about, or you can throw names at me and I can give you my opinions on them. I think that's where it is. It's certainly interesting to bring in, and the picture was cool this week to bring in Ivan Taylor, Burris and Bettis, and see all their dads and things like that. But if you're aiming for national championships, day one, Bettis and Burris, I don't think are guys that are like absolute game changers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I sort of like the idea of like, hey, if you're going to take a chance on someone, let it be a kid whose dad played in the NFL. But the way it's worked out, like those are guys that Notre Dame took commitments on before. These other guys that they're still trying to add now. Obviously, I think maybe if there wasn't a coaching change at wide receiver, maybe it would be a different story with the way the commitments have played out. But do you think a 4-man class, if you add Derek Meadows and Tanook Hines to that, would that be something that would be good, average? Well, how would you sort of classify that?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who gets Meadows immediately shoots through the roof. Hines is a little bit less of a known quantity because, even for a kid at Duquesne, even for a kid from the Houston area, those kids play a lot of 7-on-7 and go to a lot of camps and aren't hiding. We haven't seen Hines a lot. So, I think getting out there and competing, but he is certainly fast and he does give that dynamic element. You bring Meadows into this class and it gets a lot better very, very quickly.
All right. And Ray John asked a question. I think if I'm interpreting it right, he says, is there some kind of domino effect going on with ND's wide receiver recruits? I wonder if they get a big name guy like Meadows, that then maybe that leads to some more receivers, because they have the quarterbacks you would think that wide receivers would want to play with, but it just hasn't necessarily gone that way for them in the wide receiver market.
Yeah, one of the good trends that is happening in recruiting, and it's been happening for about 3 or 4 years now, is that the top guys want to play with each other now. It used to be that they wanted to play against each other, that if Derek Meadows, commits to Notre Dame, then every other 6'4" receiver in the class goes, I'm not going there. I'm going to go somewhere else because I want to be the guy. Well, now it's changed quite considerably. Ohio State just took Bo Jackson and Isaiah West at running back, and Jordan Davison, the 5-star number 2 running back in the country, is like, no, I'm still very interested in them. It doesn't scare kids off anymore because that one, they sort of all know each other now. They're all on visits all the time. So they run into each other a lot. They play 7-on-7 across the country every weekend. So there isn't this idea anymore of like, well, I don't know him, and Texas or USC took this receiver, so I'll look elsewhere. It's like, oh no, Texas or USC took a receiver. They're hot now. I want to play for them. That's the team I want to go play for. So I definitely think if you get a Meadows to commit at some point soon, that does not hurt with any other receiver. It actually probably helps.
And while we're talking about the passing game, a position that Notre Dame does recruit pretty consistently well is tight end. Jeff Stevens asked, for 2026, what is the best fit and highest ranked tight end for Notre Dame? So I did pull up the list of offers that Notre Dame has out for tight ends in the 2026 class. It looks like there's 5 of them so far. Caden Prothro out of Georgia, Kendra Harrison out of North Carolina, Brock Harris out of Utah, J.C. Anderson out of Illinois, Hezzy Kent out of Georgia. I believe Anderson, Harris, might just be those two have visited, and they have visited Notre Dame recently. They've been on campus. J.C. Anderson's been a couple times, and then Brock Harris was on campus in June.
Yeah, Anderson would be the guy that's most traditional of what you're thinking when you're looking at a Notre Dame tight end. Massive kid, 6'7", huge catch radius, not insanely athletic, but can get open, kind of get down the seam and make plays. Brock Harris is very similar, probably about an inch shorter, but probably faster, a little bit more athletic. So the problem for Notre Dame fans with Harris is that he grew up in Oregon before moving to Utah, and he just has this thing about Oregon. So Oregon also does a really great job recruiting and using tight ends and selling him, selling that idea on him. So I think that might be a little bit of an uphill battle, but I definitely think he's interested. Anderson being an Illinois kid, he already has the offer. He already visited. That seems trending more in the right direction. I think the 3 kids in the Southeast would be a little bit more of long shots. They all feel like they're Alabama, Georgia, Florida State types. But Prothro out of that group would probably be the best. He is long and lean. He's almost like a big wide receiver because he could run so well. Yeah. So if Notre Dame could get in there, that would be phenomenal because he could really put a lot of pressure on defenses by stretching the field. Unlike some Notre Dame tight ends in the past who have certainly done really well and caught a lot of passes, but didn't really have that dynamic speed down the field.
Yeah, I know when Notre Dame extended a bunch of its offers in the class on St. Patrick's Day for its Pot of Gold Day, that was one that a couple people on the board were like, "Holy cow! Look at this guy. We want him. he's impressive." So I certainly get where you're at with his abilities. So yeah, let's get back to talking about what or I guess there was one more official visitor that visited in the past week that we haven't talked about, and that's safety Jadon Blair. He's another longtime target for the Irish, 6'4", 185 pounds, the number 30 safety out of Winston-Salem, Mount Tabor in North Carolina. My understanding is he came into his midweek visit to Notre Dame high on the Irish, and that continues to be the case. I think the only concern is the official visit schedule, because he still has a Florida State and Penn State visits to make this coming week. And then he plans to announce his decision on July 5th. So we'll know sooner rather than later what Jadon Blair wants to do. Virginia Tech, Louisville, South Carolina, Michigan are all schools he's taken official visits already to. I have not made a prediction yet. I'm leaning towards Notre Dame, but I don't know that I want to. It's tough because I think Penn State is the school that Notre Dame should be the most concerned about, and that's his last official visit. And sometimes that can be a recipe for a team to pull out a victory.
Yeah, that's certainly true, Tyler. I think a lot of times, especially now that June is open to official visits and you can take as many as you want, even though right. I think by this time of the month, most kids are regretting putting so many on their schedule. I mean, it sounds fun to go to all these places until, your layover is now 3 hours and the plane isn't there and you want to get home and you still have finals and all those kinds of things. So, but in terms of Blair, I would say it is sort of a 2-team race. I think it's Penn State, Notre Dame. He has, great relationships at both schools. I certainly give the academic edge, even though I'm a Penn State grad, to Notre Dame. Yeah, using myself as an example there. But I think both are still very much in this. He has, the Penn State secondary coaches do a phenomenal job, getting after him and being involved for a long time. But I do think those relationships that he has at Notre Dame, plus the academics, kind of lean me to think that Notre Dame is the team to beat. Now, if that Penn State visit completely blows him away to end the month, then maybe things could change. But I think he goes into it thinking that Penn State has to prove that Notre Dame could be beaten.
Yeah, and since we're talking about Penn State, might as well hit Jameer Joseph, who made an official visit earlier this month to Notre Dame. But now I think following his official visit to Penn State this past weekend, appears like he could likely end up in Penn State's class. A handful of future casts have been submitted in Penn State's favor following that visit. As I alluded to earlier with Ivan Taylor and then Jadon Blair, Notre Dame may need to expand its safety board, and maybe someone like Dylan Robinson is something they do. That's not something I've heard in doing any reporting about it, but obviously we discussed that schools like him as a defensive back, so it wouldn't be crazy if Notre Dame decided to do that. But I think there's some other guys that Notre Dame may have in mind in terms of potential safeties down the line. I know one is Brandon Logan, a kid out of Fort Wayne who's committed to play baseball at Vanderbilt. But Notre Dame has hosted him a couple times and had him camp at Notre Dame, and may decide to offer there. They have not offered yet, but someone that they've been keeping tabs on. The other two remaining targets that visited earlier this month are a pair of 4-star linebackers, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and Madden Ferramo. Owusu-Boateng from Florida, or from, I believe, Virginia originally, but plays at IMG Academy. Then Ferramo out in California. I actually put in FutureCast for Notre Dame to land both of those guys coming off of their official visits the previous weekend. Which prediction do you feel like is more likely to make me look smart?
I would think both, but Ferramo, I think, I don't want to say for sure, but I think it's very much trending in that direction. So, I don't think he made Ohio State this past weekend. And then, I had thought early in his recruitment that he was almost a near lock to USC, but that never really gained traction. So, especially with the new staff, this is a kid who has been recruited for at least since he's been in his 8th grade year, and really could be like one of the best looking recruits in this class. If they get both, that linebacker core is going to look phenomenal. I mean,
they're pretty impressive.
I mean, they just look like phenomenal, great players. I love how Ferramo plays. He plays a lot like Kingston Viliamu-Asa did last year. No one that I've seen in a lot of years plays with like that fearlessness and just that drive every single play as Kingston did, but Ferramo's pretty close. He actually is a better looking prospect too. He's 6'3", 225, long, and just has that, Polynesian personality on the football field, like the nicest kid off of it and just mean on it. And then Owusu-Boateng, obviously there's the family connection there that I think he's saying it's not playing a factor, but I think it certainly is. Plus Notre Dame has done such a great job recruiting him. So there will be schools in the Southeast that interest him. But again, I think probably, USC is trying to make a run at him, and Hilton Stubbs, the commit, and Julian Lewis are trying to go after him and get him. That could be something to watch, but I just get the sense that, when it's time to settle in and make a decision, that both pick Notre Dame.
Yeah, and Notre Dame wisely had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah on campus when Nathaniel made the visit, and Nathaniel had a number of other family members there. So to have his half brother who won a Butkus Award at Notre Dame, and certainly has had some success in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. It's sort of hard to ignore. And he's a different prospect than Jeremiah. Jeremiah was like a safety who needed to be developed, and Nathaniel, like you mentioned, both him and Ferramo, They are very physically developed and look like they should be guys that can compete to play early in their career. Nathaniel Usuboteng is planning to be at our Rivals 5-star event later this month. What do you think he needs to do to reach that 5-star status?
So this is a question, and for people that don't know, like our rankings are not based off of who looks good or who plays well on the high school level. It's a projection to how we expect them to play in college and where they're going to be taken in the NFL draft. And so linebacker has become one of those positions where it's very difficult to be taken in the first round. It's just a position where I think NFL teams feel they can wait on those guys. It's also become a position where they just want these sort of, if you're not a straight interior guy, they want length and speed on the outside. And so they don't really care, if you had 165 tackles, because they're going to take that length over anything and that athleticism. If you're an outside linebacker, can you be an edge rusher? If you're an edge rusher, can you stand up and cover? It's like those kinds of things. And so first round, which has been so dominated by other positions, quarterback, receiver, offensive lineman, corner. It's just hard to name too many 5-star linebackers, if any, because you don't want to fall in love with a kid in high school and say, wow, he had 350 tackles over his high school career. He's definitely a first-round draft pick in 4 years, and then he goes to the combine and his arms measure short. Like those kinds of things are what we're trying to think about and project on. So even if some of the rankings look off based on high school production, it's because our rankings are based on projection and what NFL teams want. Now, can we predict what NFL teams are going to want in 4 years? No. But we do our best trying to find and figure out the trends of the game, and then base our rankings off of things like that. So when we used to have a sort of soft rule that a quarterback couldn't be under 6'2" and be a 5-star, that's been thrown out because half of the NFL is that now. So, so those are the things that we're sort of factoring in. It's not that we don't like him. It's not, we don't think he's going to be a phenomenal college and NFL player, but is he going to be among those first 32 picks? And if we're being judged on that as a company, then we have to get it as right as we can. And using sort of, I hate the term analytics, but some of that in our thinking, then we're going to do it.
Yeah, you guys don't make it easy on yourself by not only trying to predict their college career, but predict what the NFL is going to think about them down the road.
So the reason, so the reason we can't do it that way is because, so we can't do it that way because UNLV's quarterback commit could throw for 12,000 yards and never play a down in the NFL. So should we make him a 5-star? Like,
right.
We can't base it off of how college teams play the game. We have to have some measure of it. And so we've basically cut it off by saying where they're drafted is sort of the final measure of if we got a ranking right. We can't tell the Dallas Cowboys, who's good, who's bad, who's going to work, who's not going to work. And so we're not using NFL, performance into that, but it is like, we thought this guy was an elite first-round prospect. He went to Notre Dame and performed really, really well. And now he's now a first-round, pick. That is an absolute hit. So the guys who really hurt are the guys who end up in the first round, who we had like 40th in the country, just outside of that 5-star realm. That we, like this year, 2 of them that we think that I'm sort of worried about now are Kelvin Banks, the offensive lineman at Texas, and Harold Perkins, both who had less than stellar Under Armour games, and we dropped from 5-star. Now it looks like they're going to be first-round picks, and just kills us. Those are the ones that really hurt.
Yeah. Well, the I guess the good thing and the bad thing is no one will ever remember if you're right, and they'll only remember if you're wrong. I wanted to circle back to Faremo real quick. It was interesting. You sort of compared him to Kingston Viliamu-Asa. I heard Notre Dame staffer mentioned that to me last summer after he visited for the first time. He's like, that's our next Kingston. Like we want to get him after getting Kingston. And I think it seems to be working. Notre Dame's recruiting pitch for him. We'll see if it works as successfully as it did with Kingston Viliamu-Asa. But yeah, I saw him. I was able to be there when he arrived for his official visit. We were taking photos of those guys walking up, and that was another one that guys saw. They're like, man, he looks like $1 million. That we need to definitely get him. And some were like, man, is he going to be too big to play linebacker? I was like, well, let's settle down. I think he'll be okay. But I think it'll be interesting to see. He canceled his Ohio State, or I guess I don't know if he canceled it or Ohio State canceled it. He did not visit Ohio State this past weekend. Washington is the school he made an official visit to. And then I think there was a Texas official visit scheduled. I do not know if that is still on or not, but we will continue to monitor that and see what happens with his recruitment, because that would be a big get for Notre Dame as well. All right, the two guys that are in Notre Dame's class that people are the most nervous about are Deuce Knight and Ivan Taylor. Ivan Taylor's the newest one because he made an official visit to Alabama earlier this month. ND Sailor asked, is Ivan Taylor looking to be Peyton Bowen 2.0? Ivan Taylor returned to Notre Dame's campus this past weekend for official visit. You mentioned the sons of former Steelers taking the photo together with their dads on Notre Dame's campus. But I interviewed him yesterday. He still plans to make an official visit to Michigan this coming weekend. He said he wants to leave things open. Do you think that Notre Dame can hang on to him, and how big of a loss would it be to not be able to hang on to him?
Yeah, it would be a loss, certainly. I mean, he's sort of he has the NFL pedigree, and he's a very talented kid, and he had been committed and all of those kinds of things. Where I would find some solace is that he went to Alabama, didn't flip, and then the next weekend was back at Notre Dame. So I think that's a very good sign. But like everyone knows in recruiting, for about 11 months, it's a bunch of conjecture, and then everything hits the fan all at once in 1 month. And so this could come down to in-home visits 3 days before Christmas. And who knows? I mean, like someone said about Peyton Bowen, he was certainly going to one place, then he was going to a second place, and then Oklahoma was never really even involved in it. And then they decided that was sort of a happy medium place that he can go, and he's thrived there. So I'm not going to make any sort of prediction on where Ivan Taylor ends up. I do think that Notre Dame is in fine position. When it comes to Deuce Knight, this one does get interesting because Lane is coming after him. There's no doubt about it. He left where I would be a little more concerned too is that he left high school to go to Nashville to high school. And then about 3 months later was back in Mississippi. So is there a little homesickness there? Is there a little just wanting to be closer to home? Is that part of this concern? I will tell you, though, that more than almost any quarterback commit in the entire country, he's very active with Notre Dame commits and targets and being there and getting back up there all the time. And I definitely think there is some wanting to see what the Notre Dame offense looks like this year. There is also a problem that Ole Miss's offense is almost guaranteed to be really good. So I think there's something to be said there. Ole Miss is really not going after all that many other quarterbacks, but now with the portal, it almost doesn't, it's hard to really judge that. Like, does Lane think he could flip him? Or does Lane think if he doesn't flip him, he could just go to the portal and get somebody else? Those kinds of things. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch for Notre Dame fans. There certainly has to be some nervousness, just like if an Indiana kid had been committed to Ole Miss and Notre Dame was going after him. The longer that goes, there's definitely concern there. But, man, everything up until today, Deuce Knight is acting like he's staying in Notre Dame's class.
Yeah, he's saying and doing everything you'd want him to do. I think if he visits Ole Miss, then I think the alarm bells start to go off a bit. So we'll see what happens. I mean, you can't predict whether or not he's going to do that. And you mentioned his recruiting efforts. Not only is he like talking to guys, he's getting to campus all the time. I think he's been to Notre Dame at least twice in June, maybe 3 times. He was here for several days last week. His official visit was at the end of the week, and he's been a regular here. I think he's been here 12 times now. And we're talking a long trip, like, right. If we're talking about homesickness, he's still finding the time to get up to Notre Dame a lot. So if he were to come to Notre Dame and got homesick, I think he would know the path back and forth pretty well by the time he would get to Notre Dame. But yeah, and the involvement with the recruits, and he was even involved. Riley Leonard, Notre Dame's transfer quarterback from Duke, had a couple of quarterbacks and receivers down to work out with him this summer in Alabama, and Deuce Knight made the trip down. Riley reached out to him and said, "Hey, if you want to drive down, we'd love to have you." And he was hanging out with those guys and some of Notre Dame's receivers. CJ Carr was there, so he's as ingrained in the Notre Dame culture and class as you could possibly be. But yeah, there's good old Lane Kiffin. That's probably not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, I think from Notre Dame's standpoint, you just got to, or Notre Dame fans' standpoint, they're just like, can Ole Miss just find a quarterback? Can we get this over? But like you said, with the portal, I mean, you can maybe go all in and say, you know what, if we'll go for Deuce 9. If we don't get Deuce, we'll figure it out later. And maybe that's what Ole Miss is working on doing. It's certainly risky, but I don't know anyone that. I think risky just sort of describes Lane Kiffin, right? I think that's if you're going to expect someone to be risky, it would be Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, he's also someone, Lane, who complains about the portal and how NIL is changing college football into free agency, and then loads up in the portal. So it's not, unpredictability is certainly something there.
Brian asked, "Do teams still get one official?" I don't keep up with the recruiting rules. Yes, you can. A recruit can make unlimited official visits to as many schools as he wants, but you only get one to a specific school. I think there's like lone exception is if, and I didn't even know this until it happened when Marcus Freeman replaced Brian Kelly. If there's a head coaching change, they can give you another official visit, which that was something I wasn't aware of. But obviously Notre Dame fans don't want that to be the case. That they need another official visit to try to get guys.
Also, let it just be said that there have been so many visits, not only this month, but this entire offseason, that every recruit in the country must have unlimited funds to travel, because it is just amazing how much time and money they must be spending out of their own pockets for this. And that will end the sarcasm on that point.
Yeah. It is funny how like the official visit was like, when I would describe it to readers, it's like, okay, that means they're paid for. It's like, well, now with NIL, there's plenty of unofficial visits that are being paid for, maybe just not coming straight from the athletic department budget. But there's a way that those visits are being made, because it's expensive to travel back and forth as much as a lot of these kids do these days. But I guess my personal opinion, I'm more. I think I would be more concerned about Ivan Taylor right now. I think there's certainly a chance he remains in Notre Dame's class, but I think it was good that he got back up to Notre Dame, but it wasn't like he reaffirmed his commitment. He's like, okay, this is just another step in the process, and I'm going to go through with these other things I want to do, which is personally, I don't have a fault with kids doing that. Like, take your visits, make sure you are sold on what you want to do. Like, you only get one shot at this. Obviously the transfer portal is different now, but you get your first decision can be your most important decision, I think. So make sure that you're convinced that this is what you want to do. And so he's going through that process now. As a fan, you're not going to probably like it, but he'll figure out what he wants to do, and that's all that really matters for the kid himself. All right. I wanted to do a little bit of a preview of the Rivals five-star event. Excuse me. It returns this year and is scheduled for next week in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll be heading down there and looking forward to experiencing my first Rivals 5-star. For those unfamiliar with it, Adam, what should they expect to come out of it next week?
Yeah, so we're really excited about bringing it back. It had been sort of a staple of the summer for us, where we have the regional Rivals camps And then to close out the summer with a bang, we have the Rivals 5-star. And, it's basically like a who's who of college football stars and NFL stars now. So Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Bryce Young, I mean, just down the list of guys at every position, Najee Harris, Leonard Fournette at running back, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, just on and on and on. A lot of the elite high school players over the years have done the Rivals 5-star. We've had it at Soldier Field in Chicago, which was just phenomenal. Except being outside in June in Chicago was a little dangerous. We were worried about thunderstorms the whole time. We've had it multiple times in Baltimore and Atlanta. And now we're at the Jacksonville Jaguars facility this year, hoping to talk to some players there. Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones are on that roster, and they are 2 5-star alums. Cool. And the roster is very, very strong. So, So just to give an example at some positions, Juju Lewis, Brady Smigel, KJ Lacey, Deuce Knight, Achilles Smith, Tramel Jones, Keelan Russell, and Tavian St. Clair are the quarterbacks. So multiple 5-stars in there, multiple classes. Down the list it goes. A great group coming to Jacksonville. It's going to be a phenomenal event. And what we want it to be, more than just sitting around and talking, is competitive. We want these kids to see who wants to step up, see who wants to be the alpha. These guys, they play 7-on-7, and some play with shower caps on, and they're jumping into foam, and that's cool. And we get it. And we're at those events too, and we're going to have some of that at our event too, but we want guys to get after it. It's fun to be a kid, and we want them to be kids, and we're going to have things to do for them to be kids. But when it's on the field, whether it's at Notre Dame, whether it's in any college, or especially the NFL, it's about competition. So a lot of what we're doing too is, just getting a feel for these kids. Who's the leader? Who's good in the hotel? Who's a problem in the hotel? Who's throwing pizza? Who's cleaning it up? Who on the field is getting after it? We have a bench press competition. It's voluntary. So we want to see who steps up and starts pumping out reps. And Landon Rink is a defensive lineman from Texas who did 22, I believe, at OT7 a few weeks ago. That would have put him, I believe, 8th among defensive linemen at the NFL Combine this past year. I told him I want to see 24, and he got back to me that he's going to do it. So, I remember one year at the 5-star in Atlanta, someone came up and pumped out something in the 20s, and Brian Brzee, who had a shoulder injury at the time, was like, I can't do it. And everybody was just so fired up. He just got down on the bench and just pumped them out. And he ended up as a 1st-round pick. And Bryce Young was a phenomenal quarterback throughout, his high school career. It took us a little longer to make him a 5-star. He showed up to the 5-star with his dad, and his dad was front row because it's like, okay, we're going to prove you guys wrong. And he did it. He came out and did. And Bijan Robinson was at the same event and was just a phenomenal kid. So getting around these kids for the 2 days is going to be important. And then seeing them be, really, really competitive on the field is going to be really exciting too.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, this will be my first one because it went away since COVID. Have you guys made any major tweaks in the format or what the experience will be like for the recruits since it last happened?
No. Yeah. So it's going to be very similar. So they're going to come in on Tuesday. I fly to Jacksonville from California on the 24th. They'll come in on Tuesday, and it's a media day. There'll be a players lounge. There'll be a speaker. There'll be a team dinner. They'll have an event that night. Then hopefully it's sort of lights out for the next day, which is, basically like a camp setting. So we'll go through some drills, but these guys don't need to be taught how to backpedal and how to keep their eyes downfield and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be a ton of one-on-ones, and a lot of times those can get really, really competitive. Every rep is going to be filmed by multiple people in multiple angles, and then there'll be a lunch break, and then in the afternoon, the big men, we're not going to forget about them. They'll have one-on-ones, and then what we call a big man challenge. So they'll do tug of war, and they'll do all kinds of physical activities to kind of really get going. And then, the real business starts with like a one-on-one competition that's actually scored. So, if you win a rep, you get points. If you lose reps, you get docked points. And then the skill players will be playing 7-on-7. So we've already drafted the teams. We have that ready to go. And that, especially early, and then in the championship, can get really competitive because these kids play 7-on-7 all the time. So it's all about like chemistry at that point. So we want to see who's comfortable together, how fast the quarterbacks can get chemistry with the wide receivers, and then what defensive players can make plays. So it'll be a really fun, exciting event. It's been proven to work over the years. A lot of NFL players are at it. I think within the, we had to do this for the Yahoo PR team, but well into the hundreds of NFL players have gone through the 5-star challenge. We've also had an underclassmen challenge that we could possibly bring back next year and beyond. But we're going to Jacksonville. It's going to be a great event. We're excited about it.
Is there maybe it's not specific to this group? Is there a position group that you're most interested in seeing, or is there like every year this is the position group that I'm most like you think these camps are like the best at showing you something from?
Yeah, it's really weird because it's like every position group for a different reason we want to see. Like there was a quarterback who will be unnamed. I'll tell you who it was in Jacksonville. Who one quarterback is throwing, the other quarterback is on a knee tossing him the ball like out of a shotgun situation, and this quarterback told us he wouldn't get on a knee for any quarterback. And so we're like, okay, red flag. That is a total red flag. You're going to be in pain. The kid ended up being a massive pain, and I believe is out of football now. Remind me to tell you who that was.
Okay, I will.
Running back is great to see, though, because what we like to do is get them physical. So one of the things that they do at this camp is we have a running back linebacker blocking drill. So a lot of these running backs that are coming, Jordan Davison, Harlem Berry, Byron Lewis, Jabri Coleman, Shaquay Mills-Knight, Gideon Davidson, Jasper Parker, and Turbo Rogers, they're jacked up now. These aren't these tiny little scat backs. So, linebackers think they can eat them up. Well, they engage and they get after it. And so, especially at an event like this, you get a lot of alpha personality and you're not getting guys backing down. So we want to see that physicality because they're going to have to do that blocking at the elite level in college and in the NFL. So that's interesting. The wide receiver DB one-on-ones are always great. D-backs, we don't want you to hold. If you're listening now, we don't want you holding through the entire route. You're not impressing us by taking a receiver and throwing him to the ground because that's a 15-yard penalty. If you want to jam him at the line and drive him out of bounds at the end of the route, we'd love to see that. But let's play football here. And also from wide receivers, we don't want you to just be, jocked by some D-back and just start complaining about it. Get off that jam. Get into your route. A lot of kids, we're also having a 40-yard dash contest, again, voluntary, but we do want to see who steps up and wants to put times down. So that will be very interesting to see. But, straight line speed is one thing. When a 6'3" corner is jamming you at the line and then kind of in you with the whole route and then is driving you to the sideline, let's see how fast you could be there. That's real football speed. So we want to see those kinds of things. Offensive O-line, D-line is always great. We want to see, edge rushers not taking a 15 technique and then just running outside and running around. We want guys within a line of scrimmage. We want to see how good these offensive tackles are at kicking out and getting, space, letting people come to them, not guessing, not bending at the waist and lunging at people. We want to see D linemen not, have a plan for their moves, not just get to the edge every time and get around somebody. That's certainly fine if you can get to the quarterback that way, but having a variety of moves, both inside and outside, who's powerful, who's not, who's big. And you'll see this too, Tyler. You'll see guys who are massive, but they're not really strong. They could get driven back. We don't want to see that. We want to see the Doug Utus of the world who anchor and don't move. That is great. And so every position has something going on. So It's going to be a great event. We want it to be super competitive and fun at the same time. And that's what makes that event so special.
And there are right now 4 Notre Dame commits signed up to attend. Deuce Knight, quarterback, obviously Christopher Burgess Jr., the defensive end, offensive tackle Owen Strebig, and cornerback Dallas Golden. I know there have been conversations about Deuce Knight potentially adding a 5th star. How impressive you been with his offseason? You're talking about OT7 a little bit earlier. What do you hope to learn about him next week?
Yeah, I've seen him a lot. I loved him last spring when I saw him at the OT7 finals. He's been great. This offseason, there has been sort of a hot and cold factor with him, though. So some events he shows up and you're like, man, he did not have a great event. And then some events you're like, wow, that kid is phenomenal. So I'll see him over the next few days at Elite 11. Well, they'll put him through a battery of drills to really kind of test him in every way. We'll get a better read from him there. And then he's coming to the Rivals 5-star, and we'll see him against, other guys that are 5 stars right now and others that are working toward it. The one thing that I love about Deuce Knight, and what cannot be questioned, is that the kid shows up to everything. I mean,
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
He is not someone who sits home. He's not someone that just says, hey, I'm the number 1 dual threat quarterback in the country. I don't need it. I don't need to prove anything. He's constantly working, constantly going places. That shows a love of football that cannot be underrated. Like some of the rankings process and some of this evaluation stuff is, does the kid actually love playing the sport, or is he just a big kid that someone threw him out there and just made him play? So there's no question that Deuce Knight loves football. He wants to be around the game. He's always at events. And so that definitely says something about him.
All right. And of the other 3 Notre Dame commits, Burgess, Strebig, and Golden, who is the most intriguing to you?
Yeah. So I'll say something about each of them. Burgess, we had at an event last summer. Very good, good looking player. Is he an inside guy, an outside guy? We'll see. That'll be interesting. Strebig got a little viral this offseason as Justin Hill kind of took him off of his feet and pushed him over. I believe at Under Armour. I don't know where it was, but it was at an Under Armour camp. We want to see, just how powerful he is and just how tough he can be on the outside there. So, I love his frame. We certainly got Joe Alt wrong, and they're very similar frames. So we'll see how that plays. Dallas Golden, we're very excited about because he doesn't do a lot of events. He doesn't show up a ton of places. So it was exciting when his registration came through because he is a kid that definitely plays with confidence, has a lot of athleticism. But now, he's going up against some of the best wide receivers in the country in a one-on-one setting. It'll be very interesting to see how he does.
All right. I got a couple questions that were submitted for you and put you on the spot. Do you know how many Rivals 5-stars were drafted this past year?
I don't. That number is taken into account, but I want to say possibly 9. So the weird part about this draft, and this could be company policy being battered into my head, but this was the COVID year for the draft. So some kids are coming back to school. Some kids left early. And then the evaluations for the 2020 class were just, I don't want to say abysmal, but very lacking because there were just no events. That was the year that there were no all-star games into 2021. The summer events were basically canceled, and then half the country didn't even play in the fall. So you're going off a lot of tape and a lot of just sort of hearsay to put together a ranking and hope it looks okay.
Jeff asked, and I apologize for him bringing up fall already. We want summer to last as long as it can. Adam, what is the best interstate high school game this fall?
Oh, geez. Day by day, I'm trying to put a roster of 104 players to all show up to an airport. July is the time that I get my summer schedule in place. So I promise to come back and answer that question.
All right. Last one from Rajon. What is your opinion on Will Black, the offensive tackle committed to Notre Dame, who I think just jumped over Owen in the last Rivals update.
Yeah. So Will Black is someone who's very interesting because we saw him at an event of a company that will not be named. And he looked great. I mean, phenomenal. It looked bigger than David Sanders. And that's saying something. So,
Right.
You hear 6'7", 295 and you go, okay, yeah, the kid's probably 6'5.5", 280 and whatever. But absolutely love the kid. What we love most about him is that at 6'7", 295 is actually not totally filled out yet. So
right.
He'll probably end up 6'7", 6'8", 310, 315, very little bad weight. I'm going to say a term, but it's actually true, like skinny ankled kid, like not a kid that's heavy footed. He has athleticism in his lower half. So he is absolutely someone who we've moved up now. He's number 1 in Connecticut, which doesn't really say much, but 62 in the country. We think a whole lot of him. We want to see more of him. I don't think he's going to be playing elite competition this season, but in an all-star game, he is definitely someone that projects as someone that we could be talking about a much higher ranking.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier he missed on Joe Alt, and I think everyone's trying to figure out who the Joe Alt in Notre Dame's class is right now because they have three good offensive tackle commits, and Notre Dame offensive tackles have been playing pretty well for the last decade. So
rarely do I say, Tyler, that I regret not going to the Minneapolis suburbs, but this time I do wish we saw him somewhere.
All right, well, that will do it for this week's show. Next week for our viewers, we'll maybe at an abnormal day / time because I'll be traveling down to Jacksonville for the Rivals 5-star on Monday. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on your alerts for a heads up of when we plan to go live. Eric and I are still planning to do an Inside Indy Sports podcast later this week, so keep an eye out for that. If you're not a subscriber to our website, we hope you consider taking advantage of our 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com with the promo code NDYT. There's a sign-up link in the video description below. Thanks again for joining us, Adam. Really appreciate that. There was a lot of, I thought, pretty good compliments in the chat. So if you didn't get a chance to see them, really appreciate that. And it seems like the audience is as well. Thank you for taking an hour out for us. And I will see you next week. And I'll see our YouTube audience next week as well.
All right. Take care.